Hi, thanks for tuning in. Our guest today is Joshua Penner, who's the mayor of Orting, Washington, a board member at the Association of Washington Cities, a trustee for the AWS Employee Benefits Trust, and co-founder of Inquisio, a firm dedicated to employing technological solutions to the information access problems prevalent in municipal and county governments. So, did I get that correct?
Yeah, except AWC Trust instead of AWS Trusts.
Joshua, why don't you tell your story, what you're doing, what your main focus is, and how do you combine all those roles that you have?
Sure. Well, at Inquisio, we help the public access government data in moments. I think another way to say it is we help people find the truth faster. And the way we do that is through platforming a lot of emerging technology. And, our unique insight and ability is the ability to get this technology, create an elegant way to engage with it, and put it in the hands of city staff, citizens, and users that need information access. If you think about like the information that Perplexia or ChatGPT has, and those are amazing tools, they only have what they can scrape offline. Which, if you think about the information in governments like an iceberg, the part that's floating above the surface is what they can scrape, right? That's the stuff that's published online. But the average jurisdiction only publishes about 100 documents online, and they create 500 to 1,000 documents a day of relevant policy and information that is just uncrawlable, unsearchable. And what we're doing at Inquisio is building relationships with each of these jurisdictions and helping them to get their information out to the world. What they get out of it is they get to save a ton of staff time. As a mayor myself, I have 50 employees, and that's a pretty modest sized city. 10% of my staff, 5 employees, $500,000 a year just in staff time right now is spent to answer simple questions that come in the door that are hidden. The answers are hidden somewhere on some document that isn't published. And so that's what our jurisdictions, that's what our partners get out of a relationship with us, is the ability to maybe take 5 staff members whose job it is to look up information and turn that into 2 staff members looking up information. One staff member maybe doing mental health co-response, another one doing more park stuff, another one maybe another police officer. So cities are really excited about the idea to better utilize their very limited funds, and that's what we offer them.
Yeah, makes total sense. Um, and what's interesting, you told me earlier that in the US, especially maybe in smaller towns, it's common to have a mayor as a part-time job, which allows you to combine it with being a founder of a company, just like you are. Can you tell a little bit more about that, maybe for folks who can't really understand how how you can combine all that?
So this is one of the weird things about being a mayor. And look, I hate to say it this way, right? But being elected is kind of like a club, right? If you're inside it, you're inside it. If you're outside it, you don't know what it's like to be elected. And when you are in the club, right, you get all this knowledge of just kind of how things work. And one of the that benefits us because when we connect with other people, we don't have to like demonstrate that we know their problem. They know that we know that we know their problem. But some of the other things which surprised me in the last couple months is that most people have this kind of assumption that their city council members and their mayors are full-time elected officers, and in all but like maybe 200 cities and nationwide, mayors are part-time mayors. Even in large cities, they're part-time mayors, and most of them have a day job. I can point out several mayors of very large cities who, or maybe their day job, they're an attorney, or they're a doctor, and in the evening, their side hustle, their side gig, is working through policy. And I'm not saying they don't work their tails off, but for the most part, most of the people who represent you in the U.S. are part-time representatives and have a full-time gig somewhere else. I think maybe, and this is straying into philosophy, Maybe that's the problem with national politics, is that we have a bunch of full-time politicians instead of folks who have to hold down a day job while working on policy. So I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for answering because that is something that probably not even many Americans understand. Though I do think that people who are in maybe smaller towns, communities, they're closer to legislation. They understand that, but that's a very interesting fact. Another thing which is kind of curious and makes me curious is basically you're building your product with your company that you're selling to another um, governments like local governments or mayors, and obviously you cannot sell it to your own uh, town. So is it hard to have this kind of weird relationship where you're kind of selling the product and you cannot use it yourself or buy it? How does that work?
I I think it's really important that we address, the ethical concerns. And you're 100% right. I can't use my city as a guinea pig. In fact, I can't even hold meetings in my office at City Hall. Right, I have to keep that separation very clear. Otherwise, there's an implication that I'm using the city to make money, and um, I think that's the dance that every part-time mayor, every part-time politician has to play. Is that sometimes you have a solution that could help your community out, that you have to step aside and realize that um, there has to be an independent process the community goes through for all purchasing. There's an interesting case in Washington State years ago where it was a very small town, and they had a massive windstorm. Buildings collapsed, trees falling on things, and there was no capacity in that town, because they're 30, 40 miles away from anyone else, to do cleanup, except for one of the council members owned a construction company that had the equipment that could help the town clean up in an emergency. And so they were unable to contract with that company simply because of that appearance of fairness. And there has been some changes in laws for extreme circumstances in, say, Washington State around that sort of issue. But that's the kind of dance you have to play. I hope that helps, highlight what you're talking about, is that you just got to be very careful when you're in these roles, in any leadership role. Like, if you ever serve on a board, it's the same fundamental concerns. Is you just need to be aware of your own conflicts and declare them. If you don't declare your conflicts, then you're likely to run headfirst into something where you have an ethical concern.
Yeah, yeah, that completely makes sense. Um, do you know if some politicians have to completely give up their business when they say elected to the federal government or something like that? I'm not sure how that works, but I've heard that maybe people who are elected to the federal Congress cannot have like businesses because it may be an ethical problem or a conflict of interest.
Well, I don't think there's any way to give up every business interest if you're in business, right? If you're at say Congress, and I don't serve in Congress. I'm clearly not the president of the U.S., but a business is often an independent entity with multiple stakeholders, and the business is not going to disappear, and neither should your share of the business disappear. But you should not be in a position where you could advance the interests of the business through a vote, which means that you may have to recuse yourself from the vote or from engagement in the debate around that. And so I can't give an opinion on what the legalities are at the federal level, but businesses very, very rarely are run by an individual, and the business is not going to disappear just because the individual has a different side hustle.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, thanks for explaining that. That's very interesting to know. Um, I'm not sure if you want to talk about that. Say no. If you don't want to, it's okay. But I know that you have a very interesting story. You served in the U.S. Military before joining the business world and eventually the politics. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure.
If no, it's okay. But if yes, that would be interesting.
Yeah, no, serving in the Marine Corps is a foundational part of my life. So I'm happy to talk about it.
Sure, sure. So please tell us anything you want to share about that story.
Okay. Well, you know, I serving in the Marine Corps is, I think, one of the, I should say, how I served in the Marine Corps is one of the biggest accidents of my life that actually played out very well. Um, I was 2004 and I was getting ready to go to boot camp, and I was signed up as a bulk fuel specialist, which means that I had a really good recruiter because um, I wouldn't say that took advantage of my natural talents, being a bulk fuel specialist. And so I was just really excited to be a Marine, but I was also terrified of going into boot camp. And um, the recruiter called and said, "Hey, I've got a spot opened up if you want to leave next week instead of next month." And I've always been the kind of person where if I'm afraid of something, I'd rather just knock it out sooner than wait and just be afraid for longer. So I took the field radio operator spot and left for boot camp early. Didn't know what field radio operator was going to be, and ended up being a radio operator in the Marine Corps. And just by happenstance, by switching from bulk fuel to communications, I ended up working with hands down the smartest, most capable people I've ever known. Even to this day, many years later, I've been a mayor. I've been to Harvard. I started a business in high tech, and these people are still the smartest people that I've ever worked with. Which, I think from the outside in, there's always this idea of military it may not be, it's not where the rocket scientists go, and I think that's an unfair assessment. There are pockets of brilliance throughout the military in every different job classification, even bulk fuel. And to this day, the people that I served with continue to push me forward in ways that I didn't expect. And so much of my life trajectory was built from that happy accident of leaving for the Marines just a couple weeks early to be a radio operator. Years later, I started working in veterans outreach and supporting veterans in the community, and that led to entrepreneurship opportunities, which taught me how to run a business, which taught me how to do this. And so you can't. My life doesn't work if I didn't join the Marine Corps. It doesn't play out the way it has.
Yeah, yeah. So it seems like it had a profound impact on your life. Um, how did you tap into this business world after serving with the Marines? Was it hard to transition? What was the process like?
Well, transition sucks. It still sucks. I see it. A lot of people have a hard time transitioning, and much of my generation of veterans too is we're 10, 20 years separated out from service. I'm coming up on 20 years since I deployed to Iraq, which is just to me an obscene number. But uh, it transition is hard. Um, my opportunities during transition was to learn about resources and how to connect people and mental health and just a ton of other things, and that turned into opportunities to write about resources, write about things like military sexual trauma and trauma informed care and just a ton of different subjects. And those turned into the opportunity to representing veterans in VA disability claims and starting a business in marketing. And uh, yeah, the journey of transition, just, I mean, there's a lot of veterans that just decide to become entrepreneurs. and many of them do well. But I don't think my journey is too dissimilar from them, except that it took this kind of unpredictable path into where I'm at today. Along the way of working through that entrepreneurship and transition, I got engaged in local politics and learned a valuable skill set in rhetoric and debate and engagement. But at the same time, got to be familiar with a very deep problem, which just two paths moving in parallel. One is the entrepreneurship journey, and one is getting to understand an industry vertical very deeply. Converged into Inquisio, and that's where we're at today.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. Thanks for sharing that. You mentioned that your path of transition of becoming who you are wasn't a very common one. Do you want to share that? How did that play out for you, and how did you get where you are now?
Um, could you be a little more clear on that one? Which path would you like me to discuss?
Oh, both. Like you mentioned that you had two paths. First, in the politics, and the second in the entrepreneurship journey. I'm curious,
Mhm.
uh, how, how did you become the founder of Inquisio? Because before that, you probably were trying different things or working in other companies. So how did that trajectory go for you?
Sure. I was for many years. I was a solopreneur. Worked in marketing. Worked with law firms, and then I was actually working at a law firm as their director of marketing, and they just had no idea where they were going. So I won't say the name of the law firm so I don't get in trouble. Let's just say that they were lost. And I felt I could do better. So I quit and I went out of solopreneurship to work with them, worked with them for almost 2 years, and I quit and said, I'm going to go back and focus on strategy. I'd got my master's from Harvard at this point in management with focuses on strategy and finance, and started working on that. But at the same time, I was working on strategy consulting. I especially focused on marketing strategy. I was toying around with machine learning that I'd worked through in some previous courses and also in my private time, and had this idea of using machine learning for identifying when transition statements were made in meetings and other things that could save time in the public space. And then LLMs really kind of hit the scene, large language models, and they looked at the problem a completely different way, still statistically relevant way, right? Where you take and the model predicts kind of the correct answer word by word or paragraph by paragraph or whatever. But definitely platformed it in a way that you could build a whole business without being an AI genius. And that's how uh, I think that's how my journey from marketing to Inquisio, an AI platforming company that supports governments and jurisdictions, came to be. So, like so many things in my journey, it's you can't predict it from the beginning, but when you look backwards, you can see how the different pieces knit together into this tapestry.
Yeah, yeah, I think it was Steve Jobs' quote, something like that. Like
Hmm.
when you look in the past, you see how things kind of connect and how they lead to where you are now.
Oh yeah.
Um, yeah. Um, do you want to share the biggest learnings, maybe as an entrepreneur or in life in general, during your path? Maybe something that you would tell yourself 10, 15 years ago if you could.
Well, if I had to talk to myself 10, 15 years ago, I don't know if I would be ready to hear it 10 or 15 years ago, but I'd say act sooner, act now. Um, that would be my suggestion to everybody else, right? Is that if you've got an idea, start putting the pieces together. Call an attorney to figure out how to incorporate today, even if you don't know how you're going to afford it, even if you don't know that it can be built. Um, most of what's built isn't built because it could be afforded beforehand. There are ways to pull things together, and what you think you need to build your company is not what you need to build your company. Your idea is the most important piece. And if you sufficiently believe in your idea and you can get others to believe in it, then you could start pulling together some interesting resources. And I know that sounds kind of vague, but that's where we're at. I would also kind of tell myself to keep putting one foot in front of the other, and keep learning. You don't ever stop learning, because every time you engage in something new, whether it's going back to school or taking a class on the weekend or reading a new book, if those things can click into something that you don't anticipate in the future. So I think the worst thing you can do is to just stop moving, right? It's just to sit and watch TV. It's to sit and not think about something else to do. Like, keep your mind busy. That doesn't mean you can't do puzzles or you can't do leisure, but everything in moderation.
Yeah, that's a great advice. And I'd add to this that sometimes, like, our life is unpredictable. We have good periods, we have bad periods, and I think it's also important to keep moving even when everything sucks, like everything
Mhm.
goes south. But when you keep moving, even during those time periods, it pays out down the road in the future.
Absolutely, 100% agree. We all have challenges, and we live through them because we have to. Um, Everybody's got some challenge that is just weighing them down. Me, you, every single person, and so recognize that the challenges don't define us. It's how we approach life. We're either the victim or we have agency, and maybe we don't have agency, but I believe I do, and so I'm going to keep approaching life as if I have agency and can affect my future.
Yeah, that's great, man. Before we end, anything else you want to share with the audience as the last minute word?
Sure. If anything that we're talking about, life, philosophy, or Inquisio sounds really interesting to you, reach out to me on LinkedIn. If you go to LinkedIn, you look up Joshua Penner, or you look up Inquisio, right? If you look up Joshua Penner, there's a lot of great Joshua Penners, but I'm the only one that's the mayor and the CEO of Inquisio. So connect with me. I'm an open connector. And then if you've got ideas, share them with me. If you want to be involved in our business and how we can make your life with your community better, connect with me as well. We're going into fundraising, and it's going to be a really exciting time.
Awesome, man. There is also a link in the description to Joshua's LinkedIn profile, so you can go directly there and connect with him and see how you can collaborate maybe in the future. But yeah, thanks for being here, for sharing your story. It was very valuable, and I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, Danny.